Al-Khwarizmi worked in Baghdad's House of Wisdom in approximately 820 CE. He wrote a mathematical text describing a method for solving equations that did not yet have a name. He called the technique al-jabr, meaning the reunion of broken parts. When his text was translated into Latin in 12th century Toledo, al-jabr became algebra. Every equation you solved in school, every mathematical proof, every algorithm on every computer on Earth, traces to one word in one text written in one library in Baghdad 1,200 years ago. The library was destroyed in 1258. The algebra was not. Baghdad was founded in 762 CA by the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur on the western bank of the Tigris in Mesopotamia, the specific land between rivers where human civilization first developed. Al-Mansur's specific design, a perfect circle 4 kilometers in diameter, the Caliph's palace and mosque at its exact center, 4 gates pointing to the cardinal directions, radiating streets, creating a mathematically precise urban plan. The city's name in Arabic, Madinat al-Salam, the city of peace, was the Abbasid statement of political intent. Within 50 years, it was the largest city on Earth, home to approximately 1 million people. The largest city in Western Europe at the same time had perhaps 50,000. Baghdad was not a city. It was a civilizational statement. The House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah, was the specific institution that made Baghdad the intellectual center of the medieval world. Founded under Caliph Harun al-Rashid and expanded dramatically under Al-Man in the early 9th century. The House of Wisdom employed scholars, translators, and researchers from across the Islamic world and beyond. Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, and Muslims working together on the translation and advancement of human knowledge. Its specific program, the systematic collection and translation into Arabic of every significant text in Greek, Persian, Sanskrit, and Syriac that could be found. The caliphs paid translators their weight in gold for accurate translations. The specific ambition was without precedent, to collect all human knowledge in one place and make it accessible for advancement. The translation movement's specific intellectual consequence is the most consequential act of knowledge preservation in human history. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century CE, significant portions of the Greek philosophical, mathematical, and medical tradition were lost in Western Europe, surviving primarily in Irish monasteries and Byzantine Constantinople. Baghdad's translators systematically retrieved and translated the major works of Aristotle, Plato, Euclid, Ptolemy, Galen, and Hippocrates into Arabic, and then advanced beyond them. The Arabic translations preserved texts that the original Greek manuscripts did not survive in Western Europe. When the Renaissance scholars sought to recover classical knowledge, the primary sources they consulted were frequently Arabic translations and commentaries produced in Baghdad. The Western Renaissance was, in a measurable sense, built on Baghdad's library. Al-Khwarizmi's algebra was the most consequential mathematical innovation of the 9th century, but it was not Baghdad's only one. Al-Battani determined the length of the solar year to within 2 minutes of the modern calculation in approximately 900 CE. Al-Biruni calculated the circumference of the Earth to within approximately 1% of the modern measurement in approximately 1020 CE, using a method involving the measurement of mountain heights and angles of depression. He concluded that the Earth was spherical and calculated its size with an accuracy that would not be matched in European science until the 16th century. Al-Haytham wrote Kitab al-Manazir, the Book of Optics, in approximately 1020 CE, describing how the eye receives light and producing the foundational principles of the camera obscura that would eventually produce photography. Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, produced the Canon of Medicine in approximately 1025 CE. The Canon, a 5-volume encyclopedic work synthesizing Greek medical knowledge with clinical observations, organized by disease system and treatment, and including sections on pharmacology, surgery, and psychiatry that were remarkably advanced for their era. The Canon was translated into Latin in the 12th century and became the primary medical textbook in European universities from approximately 1200 to 1650 CE, used in medical education in Bologna, Paris, Oxford, and Montpellier for approximately 450 years. Every European physician trained between 1200 and 1650 CE learned medicine from a text produced in Baghdad's intellectual tradition. The European medical profession was built on an Islamic foundation, preserved by the House of Wisdom. In January 1258, Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, led a Mongol army of approximately 150,000 soldiers to the walls of Baghdad. The Caliph al-Mustasim, the 37th Abbasid Caliph, refused to surrender, The siege lasted 13 days. On February 10, 1258, the walls were breached. The sack lasted 7 days. Historical sources, both Arabic and Persian, describe the subsequent destruction in terms that historians have spent centuries attempting to verify: between 200,000 and 800,000 people killed. The caliph killed. The city destroyed. The House of Wisdom, the library, the scholars, the accumulated knowledge of 5 centuries, destroyed. The Tigris River reportedly ran black with the ink of thrown books and red with blood. The specific intellectual consequence of the House of Wisdom's destruction is the question that historians have debated for 7 centuries. What was lost? The honest answer is that we do not know, because the texts that were destroyed cannot be recovered or inventoried. We know what survived: the texts that were already translated, already copied, already dispersed to other cities before the sack. We know what we can infer was lost from references in surviving texts to works that no longer exist. The specific estimate, approximately 2 million manuscripts, were destroyed in the sack of Baghdad. The intellectual tradition produced by those manuscripts, the research programs, the ongoing investigations, the specific scholarly community that produced al-Khwarizmi and al-Biruni, ended in 7 days. What might have been produced in the subsequent century of interrupted scholarship is the specific question that cannot be answered. The Mutanabi street book market, the historic book market named for the 10th century Abbasid poet al-Mutanabi, is the specific contemporary symbol of Baghdad's intellectual resilience. The street was the center of Baghdad's literary and intellectual life for centuries. A car bomb destroyed it in March 2007, killing approximately 30 people and destroying hundreds of bookshops. It was rebuilt. By 2026, Mutanabi Street is again one of the most vibrant book markets in the Arab world. Booksellers on both sides, publishers, scholars, students, the specific ordinary extraordinary activity of a city whose intellectual tradition predates Islam and has survived every catastrophe imposed on it. The books are back on Mutanabi Street. The library that was destroyed in 1258 has not been rebuilt. The tradition it represented has not been extinguished. Baghdad in 2026 is a city of approximately 9 million people. The capital of Iraq, the 14th most populous city in the world, rebuilding from the specific sequence of catastrophes that the 21st century has imposed on the city, the 8th century founded. The 2003 American invasion, the subsequent insurgency, the sectarian violence of 2006 and 2007, the Islamic State's territorial expansion across northern Iraq in 2013 and 2014, reaching within approximately 40 kilometers of Baghdad, before coalition forces and Iranian-backed militias stabilized the front. The liberation of Mosul in 2017, the 2023 return of Iraq to the international community with an elected government and recovering oil revenues. Baghdad is the city that has been destroyed more times than perhaps any other major city, and rebuilt each time. The Mongols who destroyed Baghdad in 1258 were not uniformly anti-intellectual. Hulagu Khan's wife was Nestorian Christian. His court included scientists, physicians, and astronomers. Within a generation, the Mongol Ilkhanate that replaced the Abbasid Caliphate in Persia had become a significant patron of scholarship. The observatory at Mariga, built under Nasir al-Din al-Tusi shortly after the Baghdad sack, produced astronomical observations that informed Copernicus's heliocentric model 2.5 centuries later. The specific historical complexity, the civilization that destroyed Baghdad's library, also produced the observatory whose astronomy influenced the specific intellectual development that led to modern science. Destruction and creation are not always performed by different civilizations. They are sometimes performed by the same one, in the same century. What survived the 1258 sack survived because it had already been dispersed. The translation movement that Baghdad had sponsored in the 9th century had spread Arabic texts to libraries across the Islamic world: Cairo, Damascus, Cordoba, Samarkand. The texts that the Toledo translators had already rendered into Latin before 1258 survived in European libraries. The scholars who had already moved to Cairo, to the Sultanate of Delhi, to Mamluk Syria, before the Mongol invasion carried their knowledge with them. The specific resilience of knowledge in the face of physical destruction. Ideas cannot be fully destroyed if they have been dispersed. Baghdad's intellectual legacy survived its physical destruction because the House of Wisdom had been exporting its products for 3 centuries before the Mongols arrived. The best libraries are the ones that have already given their contents away. The specific gap in Western historical education that this episode addresses is the systematic underrepresentation of Baghdad's intellectual achievement in the standard narrative of how the modern world was built. The standard Western narrative of intellectual history moves from ancient Greece to Renaissance Europe, typically skipping approximately 800 years, during which the most sophisticated intellectual work in the world was being done in Arabic, in Baghdad. The Renaissance is described as a rebirth of classical knowledge. But the classical knowledge that was reborn had been preserved in Arabic by scholars in Baghdad. The standard narrative gives credit to the Greeks who produced the knowledge and the Europeans who used it, and largely omits the specific scholars in the specific city who kept it alive for 800 years between the two. The specific Arabic origin words embedded in the English language are the most accessible evidence of Baghdad's intellectual legacy. Algebra and algorithm from al-Khwarizmi. Alcohol from al-Khul, the distillation process described by Islamic chemists. Almanac from al-Manak, azimuth, zenith, and nadir from Arabic astronomical terms. Coffee from the Arabic kawa, sofa from the Arabic safa, sugar from the Arabic sukar, derived from the Sanskrit sharkara, and transmitted through Baghdad's commercial connections to India. The specific words that ordinary English speakers use daily without awareness of their origin are the most democratic evidence of Baghdad's contribution to the world they live in. The language contains Baghdad's legacy, whether or not the history books acknowledge it. Baghdad's contribution to the Cities That Built the World series is the demonstration that a city's most consequential achievement can be the preservation and transmission of knowledge rather than the production of it. Venice produced institutional innovation. Baghdad produced and preserved intellectual innovation. Both forms of production built the world, and both prove the series' central argument. Cities are environments where specific geographic and institutional conditions intersect to produce achievements whose consequences outlast the specific conditions that produce them. Baghdad's round walls are gone. The House of Wisdom is destroyed. The Abbasid Caliphate ended in 1258. Algebra is still taught in every school on earth. The canon of medicine shaped European medicine for 450 years. The words are still in the language. The city's physical destruction was total. Its intellectual legacy is operational. One word, al-jabr, one library, the House of Wisdom. One city, Baghdad. 1 million people at its peak, while London had perhaps 10,000. Al-Khwarizmi's algebra, al-Biruni's earth measurement, Ibn Sina's medical canon, al-Haytham's optics, the translation movement that preserved Greek philosophy for the Renaissance. 7 days of Mongol destruction in February 1258, 200,000 to 800,000 killed. The Tigris running black with ink. And then, Mutanabi Street rebuilt. 9 million people in 2026. The book's back on the shelves. The words still in the language. The series continues next episode with Amsterdam, the city that invented the modern corporation, the stock exchange, and the concept of shareholders. In one extraordinary decade in the early 17th century, on a collection of canals in a swamp at the mouth of the Rhine. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the story doesn't end here, it evolves. Baghdad built the modern mind. The modern mind is still using what Baghdad built, often without knowing it. The series continues with the cities that did the same, in different centuries, on different continents, with different innovations that are still running the world you live in today.